A young man with dark, tousled hair sat on the stage during Sakura Academy's entrance ceremony and muttered that it felt like a bad joke. Realizing this was just the opening scene of a popular virtual game, the young man was determined to play, but had time only to study the game manual. A middle-aged man with a stern face spoke from the podium to those present. He loudly greeted everyone willing to risk their lives for the country. The main character listened to him with an expressionless face. He remembered the game was set in the early Showa era, when an underground world that led to another dimension suddenly appeared, and the mysterious dungeon of ancient arches became the game's central element. He then remembered where the academy was, that a military school had once stood here, and that after the troops were withdrawn, a research school was built to study the dungeon. The young man also noted that researchers began extracting valuable stones and very powerful artifacts from the dungeon and the monsters inside it. He remembered that when those powerful artifacts appeared, the balance of power between nations shifted, sparking conflict and unrest worldwide as each country moved to seize the new source of power. He also remembered that the dungeon items were so powerful people around the world would do anything for them, and Sakura Academy became a bloody battlefield where everyone fought for their own interests. Successful underground explorers received official state support that stressed how important their work was to the country. The young man saw the game had a progression system where explorers leveled up and grew stronger by killing dungeon monsters. In conclusion, he confirmed that researchers who reached high levels gained not only strength, but also wealth and power. They became famous, influential figures who were welcomed by crowds. After hearing the principal urge students to be ready to risk their lives for their country, the young man concluded the principal had not at all exaggerated the risks ahead. He recalled the little he'd read in the game manual. In this world, it was common for some people to die fighting monsters. A figure in the crowd caught his attention, and when he turned he saw a girl with long blonde hair in a ponytail, looking toward the stands with a slight smile that made him freeze in surprise. He knew her at once. Ayano Jingyuji was the game's first heroine. At the same time, the narration explained the academy's structure. There were classes A to D. Classes A to C were for students with prior combat experience. These veteran students have already explored the dungeon. They have leveled up and earned a rank in the academy's hierarchy. Horror sank in when the hero learned he had been assigned to Class D, which he bitterly called the worst because it was at the very bottom, and his face twisted in disappointment as he sat among his new classmates. Seated at his desk, he opened it and was amazed to find his manual there, unable to figure out how it had gotten there and staring at it with wide eyes. Startled, the young man grabbed his manual, wondering how it had gotten there. A stern, bearded teacher then called to the student and demanded an answer. Ready to answer, the young man stood and saw the student next to him mutter, puzzled that he was staring at an empty book. Suddenly, a character reference appeared. Realizing his life was at stake, the young man panicked, knowing simple sympathy would not help, and his face showed genuine horror at the thought of his unenviable fate. Lamenting his fate, he couldn't understand why he'd been reborn in the body of a loser who would soon be expelled, and he decided that from then on he would not go anywhere near the main character. Then a revelation hit him. His face shifted from despair to determination. This felt like his chance to change his life. Clutching the manual tighter, he realized using it could make him the strongest here. Thoughts raced as he realized the academy had many beautiful heroines, and his manual contained full walkthroughs of their plots and scripted scenes for talking to each girl that he could act out because of his knowledge. The teacher stopped what he was thinking, handed small, smartphone-like devices to the students, told them to carry them from now on, and the classmates accepted the new gadgets enthusiastically, happy to see their status. The young man turned on his device and found another student beside him, his face tightening as he recognized the game's main character. When he picked up the device, it showed all his data, including level, life, and mana, along with other indicators showing the boy's growth. Takashi stared at the status, confused about being just a student, and assumed the new device let him display everything in his head. Thinking it over, he realized he could equip skills mentally and even change his class, but a rude call cut him off and made him flinch in surprise. An intimidating student with a mohawk and piercings loomed over him, smirking at him and then at his device, making him wonder how someone of such low status could even get into the academy. The bully grabbed the device from the young man without waiting for an answer and held it up to the whole class, shouting that it was the first time he'd seen such low readings and that the young man must be cursed. A screen popped up showing Masao Yoshida's status. Even though he was a level 1 student, his stats were twice Takashi's. Takashi could not understand how an ordinary student could be so strong. Masao Yoshida kept mocking, urging his classmates to look at the boy, and laughed while the boy could only grit his teeth helplessly. Slumping forward, the young man rested his head on the desk and clutched his guidebook, letting out a bitter breath as he accepted the obvious that he was not the strongest in the world. At his desk, flipping through his manual, he realized he was almost the worst student in the class. Desperate, he scanned the manual page. A bright headline grabbed his attention. A spark of hope lit his eyes as he searched for the shortest, fastest strategy. The text said even the final boss could be defeated with this build. Takashi's face twisted into a sinister, manic grin as he realized this was his chance, but his gloating stopped when someone approached him. Long dark hair framed a girl standing before him. She handed him his device and calmly asked if it was his. Takashi looked up, recognized her instantly, and froze, stunned by her appearance. He froze when he realized who stood in front of him, and with wide eyes, he recognized the girl with long, dark hair as Hanagasaki, Raku. A line in the game manual naming her the most popular female character came to mind. Answering her quietly, horror then overtook him when he realized she must have seen his embarrassingly low status as she handed the device back, and the thought made him cringe with embarrassment and shame. Raka spoke calmly as if she hadn't noticed his embarrassment, then looked at him seriously and said it was an important item, advising him not to lose it again. Takashi watched her walk away in silence. The name Hanagasaki Raka kept running through his mind. A system window suddenly appeared showing her profile. She was Count Hanagasaki's daughter and had high-quality starting equipment. A surge of determination rose in him, and even though he'd never played the game, he felt he knew it, so he decided to accept staying in a loser's body for a chance to be in the same class as her. But then harsh reality returned. Remembering the game was known for being harsh on players, where you could lose your character forever if you overestimated your strength, he figured that if even the party members of the main characters could die, his own chances were worse. Determined at last, the protagonist reached the only correct conclusion. He had to become stronger. His decision led him to a room that looked like a hospital, a sign on the door. Inside, a female staff member was tattooing another man's back as he lay on a cot. The bespectacled young man, spotting the other approaching, asked Takashi where he wanted his coat of arms tattooed. The protagonist nervously said he wanted it in the usual place. Sneering, the employee said Takasugi should be proud he tattooed his own crest, and arrogantly added that he had already signed a contract with a high-level guild. The hero recalled those coats of arms were cursed seals that allowed the use of magic. After the procedure, Takasugi stood bare-chested in front of the mirror and studied his new lightning bolt tattoo, surprised to see his own crest of strength. As he left, Takashi started to doubt whether trusting that man had been the right choice. The guidebook had very little on him. He pushed the bad thoughts aside and focused on the positive. The class hummed with activity as students formed groups to discuss their plans. Masaya Ishida walked up to the boy with a malicious grin, said they would finally go to the dungeon after class, and added with disdain that no one would want to team up with him. Takasugi, unmoved by the taunts, showed his leadership and decided to follow the instructions exactly. Walking down the empty school corridor, he entered the locker room and found no one there either. The silence and lack of other students made the place feel tense. He followed the book's directions, went to a cabinet, and opened it with a creak, finding a single 50-yen bill at the bottom. The young man happily picked up the bill, amazed it worked, noted the local 50 yen was about 5,000 Japanese yen, and refused to resort to stealing even though it was a game. Following the instructions, he at last finished and carefully packed his loot into his backpack, satisfied that everything was going according to plan. Fully equipped, he walked to the exit with a determined expression. His destination was the dungeon. At the dungeon entrance, he found a fenced area with a small guard booth and a stone staircase that led down to a massive wooden gate reinforced with iron. At the entrance, he recalled the first day instructions. The book said that after entering the dungeon, one must not stop attacking. This was necessary to raise the hidden magic resistance parameter. His crest came to mind. The word thunder was carved into it, granting him a lightning magic spell, and an image of a powerful mage using that power flashed through his mind. Inside the stone corridor, he looked around, and when he saw no enemies, he stretched his hand out, said the spell's name aloud, and electricity crackled between his fingers. Lightning shot from his hand and struck the wall with a deafening crack, leaving a scorched mark. Takasugi watched in wide-eyed amazement and delight and could hardly believe he had succeeded. He made his decision. Concentrating, he placed his hand on his chest and cast a spell, directing all its power at himself. An electric shock enveloped his body and caused him to feel some pain. Collapsed on the stone floor in unbearable pain, his face twisted in agony as he lay there feeling the spell's effects and surprised he hadn't died of cardiac arrest. Takasugi remembered that his manual said the spell caused paralysis. Pushing himself up to his knees, he still trembled from lingering spasms and feared he would have to endure this excruciating pain forever to become stronger. Clenching his will into a fist, he decided to keep going and stretched his leg to cast the spell on himself again. Pain pierced him again, but this time he was ready. Clenching his teeth, he endured the pain. It still hurt, but less than the first time. The charred skin on his leg made him realize it was no longer a minor wound. Within 5 minutes, the burns were gone, and his leg was completely healed. The young man stared at his healed skin in amazement and realized the ether was a real miracle. Even so, the process was grueling. Casting the spell on himself again and again, his body shook with pain each time. After another attack, he thought bitterly that this torture would drive him mad before he leveled up. He checked his manual again and found a note about a protective ring that could reduce damage taken. Following further instructions, he went to the counter where a woman handed him the package with a smile and told him he could keep it. Opening the package, he found a ring of slime inside. Stepping out of the room, he found the protagonist surrounded by other students, all talking excitedly in the middle of a stone corridor. He locked eyes with Hanagasaki Rikaz. She held his gaze. He froze, imagining how he looked from her side. Shaking his head to clear unnecessary thoughts, he decided there was no point in thinking about it now and needed to focus on his goals. Holding the manual, he felt a new confidence. Glancing at his hand, now wearing a protective ring, he clenched his fist. Pleased with himself, he had improved his situation and knew this was just the start. Leaving, Takasugi noticed the girl glance at him briefly before walking away. Left alone, the young man kept training, directing the discharge into his leg again. Thanks to the protective ring, the pain was weaker than before, and he felt his efforts were starting to work and grew more confident. He acted methodically and carefully, watching his health for about 2 hours and repeatedly hitting his leg with a spell, enduring the pain for the sake of his cherished goal. After countless repetitions, it finally happened, and aiming the magic at himself again, he watched it dissipate harmlessly and then examined his leg, realizing he had achieved complete rejection. A monster suddenly rose from a pool of slime right in front of him, and before he could react, it charged at him, grinning like a predator. The slime slammed him and threw him back several meters, and he landed with a sharp pain. In a panic, he checked his device and saw he had only 1 unit of health left, realizing he was on the verge of death. He wasted no time grabbing a vial of healing potion from his pocket and drank it in one gulp. His strength returned, and his wounds began to heal. A sigh of relief slipped out as he remembered the warning from the guide's author. After that incident, he adopted a new tactic, continuing his resistance pumping, but running as far away as possible whenever monsters appeared nearby. Back at the dorm, the young man peered into the classroom and saw the other students gathered around a large screen. A screen showed a recording of the battle, with the guild's mighty warriors fighting a huge, ferocious monster, and the students watched with admiration, noting it was the night class and that the enemies were no match for them. Takasugi stood in the doorway watching the screen, amazed by the warriors' incredible strength and skill. Later, the young man returned to his room, images of the mighty warriors from the screen flashing through his mind as he doubted he could ever match their strength. The unpleasant feeling would not leave him. Everyone at the academy seemed to avoid him because of his humiliatingly low status, and that thought kept him tossing and turning in bed. Panic hit him as he remembered he could be expelled from the academy for being judged too weak, and the thought was unbearable, but he could not deny the fear lodged in his mind. The next day, all the students gathered at the dungeon entrance as the instructor announced they would finally go inside, and unlike most, Takasugi was confident and trusted his training would prevent any problems. One detail still bothered him as he stood in line with the students, and he worried the entrance ceremony listed as the first day in his handbook would not go as he expected. His hands clutched the book anxiously, doubts swarmed through his mind, and he wondered whether it was more than a typo in the book, whether this world followed its own rules, and whether the game's script could change. The bearded instructor broke off his thoughts and announced loudly that their mission today was to descend to the dungeon's 2nd floor and return safely. Takasugi had already worked out his plan of action. He would remain quiet and unnoticed. According to his book, all he had to do to pass safely was stay close to the other students, and he would not have to fight. He looked over his classmates, checking the records in his superior's database. His group was already above level 4, and Hanukasaki Raka had reached level 6. Masyashita grabbed him roughly from behind, and the young man flinched, surprised and annoyed to see him again. The tall man asked him if Takasugi could at least kill a slime. The young man said he hadn't checked yet. Kazuma Ikijo, the main character, approached them. Kazuma offered to help him level up. Stunned, the young man stared at the protagonist with wide eyes and could not speak, and even Yoshida looked surprised by this turn of events. The student instantly recalled the manual entry about Kazuma, which described him as a versatile character with a handsome face, high status, and special magic. The young man realized he couldn't get by without the main character's skills, yet he still muttered that it wasn't necessary. Ichio Zero nodded in understanding. The man said he could ask for help later if needed. He reminded them that a class exam was coming up, so everyone needed to improve their level. After that, the entire group of main characters continued on their way. Takasugi reproached Katarashika, saying Kazuma was a member of the heroes group and they should accept help from someone like him. Grateful for the offer, the student chose to follow his plan. Determined, he refused to let anyone stop him from leveling up now and followed the plan in his book, ignoring Yoshida's puzzled look. When the bell rang to end classes, Takasugi ran out of the classroom with a joyful cry, determined to boost his hidden indicators. Back in the dungeon, he cast the spell again, and to his relief, the magic did no harm because it was completely reflected, proving he had fully rejected the damage. Lost in thought, the student did not notice a nearby monster that took the opportunity to attack. Takasugi easily dodged the slime ball this time and was pleased to see his dodge skill improving. Suddenly something invisible pierced the monster and it burst, spreading across the floor, and Takasugi watched in surprise and confusion, not understanding what had happened. A familiar girl suddenly appeared before him in combat gear, holding a magic staff. She looked at him with a serious expression and asked if he was okay. The young man stood stunned by her sudden arrival. Trying to hide his embarrassment, the protagonist awkwardly thanked her and said he couldn't have done it alone. He worried about what consequences his words might bring. She offered to help him, but at that moment, the student told himself to clear his head and not under any circumstances ruin the main character's plan because the whole world would end. He awkwardly refused her offer of help and asked how she had gotten there in the first place. She said she had heard a noise and went to check it out. The girl sounded surprised when she asked whether he had already raised his level, and Takasugi, sweating, said no, feeling very awkward under her gaze. Seeing his trouble, Rika offered to help, saying she would weaken the enemies so he could finish them and level up. Gathering his thoughts, the young man firmly refused, saying it wasn't hard and he could handle it himself, aware he probably seemed stubborn and unfriendly, but simply had no time for small talk. Reiken nodded, said she understood, and walked on. Takasugi watched her go, wondering why she was alone in a place like that. Left alone, he moved on to the next stage of his plan. The book said it was time to focus on building his combat skills. All his strength had to go into attacking, not dodging or holding back. The student remembered the advice to use potions in battles to avoid dying and not to waste money on heavy armor because it is useless against magical attacks, and that all funds should go into weapons and potions. He admitted he didn't like pain, but he knew that ending the game in this world would mean his real death, and imagining the terrible consequences made him more determined, so he decided he needed to go shopping. Deciding to visit the purchasing department, he walked to the entrance determined to buy everything he needed to survive and grow stronger. In the purchasing department, the young man was amazed by the huge selection of equipment, with all kinds of uniforms on hangers and mannequins, and he looked over the goods with interest. A single outfit on the mannequin caught Takasugi's eye, a stylish black jacket with light trousers and protective gloves that he admired for its modern, practical design. Approaching the mannequin, he took a closer look at the suit, and when he learned it offered strong protection and fire resistance, he immediately wanted to buy it, his face set with firm determination. Although the purchase left him penniless, he felt no regret, and leaving the store he proudly tried on his new outfit, convinced the set justified the temporary financial strain. Back in the dungeon, he went straight to testing his new gear, casting the spell on himself once more and grinning when the armor held, knowing it all worked. After 15 hours of grueling training, he said that once he hit 100% rejection, his skill would be fully upgraded, and all skills damage would drop to 1%. The next day in class, the teacher in bewilderment looked at Takasugi and could not understand why he was still at level 1. The teacher asked sternly whether he knew students had died in the dungeon. He warned that unless he began raising his level, he could be seriously hurt. Takasugi, taken aback, thanked him nervously for his concern. The teacher said sharply that it wasn't about anxiety and that teachers were responsible for students' lives, so he had no choice. He warned that if the boy died before reaching level 5, all responsibility would fall on him, and he then scanned the classroom to see who had the highest level. His gaze landed on Hanagasaki Raka, and when the teacher called her name, she looked up at him. He suggested she go with the guy to the dungeon on Monday to make sure he gets to level 3. The girl agreed calmly, prompting surprised whispers from her classmates. The decision provoked a strong reaction. Yashida angrily demanded to know why it had to be him. Panic rose inside the young man. He had to stick to his plan, but was being forced to step up. He knew he should be the one who felt indignant, not anyone else. Later, standing in the dungeon, a heavy sigh escaped him as he took out his device and read a message from Hanagasaki asking him to wait for her after class. Not willing to wait for her, he immediately headed deeper into the dungeon, convinced she would not leave him alone so easily and determined to use the time to train. A voice called from behind. It was Rika asking why he had run away, and he screamed in surprise, dropping his device. The girl, her voice showing a touch of hurt, asked what he disliked about her. Takasugi, taken aback, nervously tried to explain that he just wanted to go at his own pace. Takasugi still couldn't believe she was here. Raka cut off his excuses, said firmly she knew why he was here and demanded he stop being secretive, leaving the student completely shocked and unsure how she could have found out. Panic hit him when he realized she must have been watching, and that terrified him because resistance was a hidden status, and as far as he knew, no one in the world should know about it. After studying her reaction, he concluded she sensed something was off but did not know the details, which gave him a slight advantage. She offered a compromise that let him keep using the spell on himself as long as he wanted, provided he followed her, and she would help him level up. He tried to dodge the question, saying he couldn't race at his level yet. Rika asked directly if it had anything to do with what he was doing here. Takasugi said it was necessary but couldn't explain why, and the girl kept asking what he was doing it for. Taking a steady breath, he met her eyes and said he was doing it to become the strongest. Hanagasaki asked again, surprised. He confirmed his intention firmly, and her faint smile in response left him a little embarrassed. Annoyed, he saw no reason to laugh because his pride was hurt. Growing serious, the student said it was a worthy aim but not that simple, and reminded him they weren't in a game. He thought wryly that she was wrong and that they were still in the game. Rikan noticed his odd reaction and looked at him in confusion. She told him to be serious and warned that if he stayed stubborn, her reputation would suffer. He replied that she had agreed to it herself before she knew all the facts. Unable to convince him, the girl sighed, suggested a new plan, and handed him an elegant pendant she said she would give him. Surprise crossed his face when he recognized the item, a pendant that restored mana. She explained her proposal, saying she would restore his health to speed up the leveling process, and asked confidently whether it was a good idea. Stunned, Takasugi thought this was a great offer, remembering how much time he'd spent waiting to recover, so it felt unexpectedly profitable. Confidently, the girl said he was right, explaining that with the pendant he could strike himself with lightning as often as he wanted, and when he finished she would help him level up as he had been told. Confused, he agreed, grateful that Reiki's help would speed things, but then a terrible thought hit him that she might have found out about his guidance. Putting those thoughts aside, he weighed the pros and cons and decided that agreeing would let him level up faster while she kept her reputation. With his decision made, he told her he would lend the pendant. He wasted no time, got ready for training again, focused, and cast a spell. The lightning strike shook him again, but Hanagasaki was ready and immediately reached out to cast healing magic. Glowing particles surrounded him, and he watched as his wounds healed instantly. It was clear that Reiki's healing magic and the mana-restoring pendant let him return to action almost immediately. In the dungeon's stone corridor, the young man studied Hanagasaki's abilities and realized that as a combat mage, she likely had a crest of healing magic that let her heal him so quickly. Summoning his courage, he called to her with a slightly silly look and asked her to show him her coat of arms. Raka looked surprised by the request. She replied sheepishly that only very close people usually asked for something like that. Takasugi had not expected such a reaction, but after a moment she agreed. Slightly blushing, the young man stared in embarrassment at the complex, elegant pattern. He recognized it at once, a third-generation coat of arms, and admired the real privileges aristocrats enjoyed. His knowledge surprised the girl, and she asked how he had learned it since information about generations of coats of arms had long been kept secret by aristocratic families. She asked whether he wanted to look at the crest just to show off his knowledge or because he had another purpose. He gave an evasive answer, let her take it as she wished, and thought to himself that she clearly did not lack confidence. Rika kept at it, asking what kind of crests someone who wanted to be the strongest would choose to wear, and saying she was only asking for reference. Takasugi mentioned fourth-generation treatments, but a girl cut him off before he finished, saying there are only 3 generations now, which made the protagonist realize he had revealed too much. He said he would say no more and that the rest was a secret. Hanukasaki, seeing she could get nothing more from him, sighed and suggested they return to using spells. With a playful smile, she asked if she could help him a little more, but he stammered and declined, suggesting she focus on leveling up instead. Rika said confidently that she didn't need it because her level was already high, and joining a group wasn't necessary to level up further. To his surprise, despite her unapproachable air, she was easy to talk to. They spent the next 3 days in the dungeon, where he trained tirelessly, and she sat beside him until nightfall helping him. Progress was slow the first 2 days, but on the third his skills improved rapidly, and he felt they would reach the goal soon. Though Hanagasaki likely didn't fully understand, the protagonist felt his body changing, his skills growing stronger, and soon turning into an absolute resistance. After raising his magic resistance, he turned to improving his physical resistance. They searched for the slime and soon stepped into a hall crawling with those monsters. Charging into the enemy line, he was immediately attacked when a slime hit him and broke his guard, and he stared at his health and mana bars in horror as he realized things were dire. Raka stepped in immediately, unleashing a powerful magical strike that destroyed many monsters in the hall, and Takasugi watched her power in amazement. Relief washed over her, but a huge dark shape emerged from the shadows, and she screamed in surprise. Stepping quickly in front of the young man, she took the full blow herself. An immense monster towered before them. The giant slime loomed above, and they both stared in horror at this new unstoppable threat. Hanagasaki Ragius planted herself firmly in front of the student, shielding him from the giant monster, told him to stay behind her because he wasn't going to level up anyway, and readied herself for battle. Instantly, she unleashed her full magical power, and a blinding beam of energy shot from her staff straight at the giant monster. The attack hit with devastating force. A beam pierced the slime's body and dealt heavy damage. The creature shuddered, gave a plaintive squeak, and shrank into a crying puddle. Takasugi moved to a safe distance to test his new abilities and cast the thunder spell on himself again, and to his surprise, he felt only a slight tingling while his body was wrapped in a faint glow. Excited, he told Raker that his skill had improved, and he now felt almost no pain, having boosted his hidden status and magic resistance so that even if a spell hit him, it would cause little damage. Smiling smugly, he said he had achieved complete rejection. The girl froze in shock, unable to believe what she had heard. Anxiously, she asked who he was and said the stunt was a state secret, warning that if the wrong people found out about it, he would be a living target and should keep his mouth shut. Sadly, she said this information would not help her in any way now. Takasugi countered enthusiastically that this was not the case. He explained that as classes level up, their spirit level also increases, so she also needed to increase her physical resistance and evasion skill. Night fell over the city. They emerged from the dungeon tired but happy. The young man said goodbye to Rika and agreed to meet her tomorrow. Apologizing, he said he was sorry for making her worry. She turned away, blushing slightly, and angrily said she hadn't worried at all. After that, they separated. Alone, he reflected on the past few days. He had to admit that, thanks to the girl's efforts, he had quickly reached level 3 and mastered the first general skill, appraisal. Hanagasaki left thinking about how she had acted. At first, he thought she just wanted more information, but now he realized she was worried about him. Flipping through his book, he recalled the rest of his plan. He needed to reach level 5 and change his class. His final goal was to become a bishop. The next day, their class had a practice session in the dungeon. Walking through the crowd of classmates, he recalled the task's details. The task was to collect a specific number of magic stones. The task required forming groups of 3. Takasugi stood aside, watched the other students form teams, and knew there was nothing he could do. Yano Jingyuji approached him and Raka smiled and said she would go with them. The girl asked again in surprise, and Yano cheerfully confirmed, adding that she would be a bit scared with her. Raka said in bewilderment that he did not see what was so scary about it, and Takasugi replied ironically that she was a merciless ice queen who could kill with a single look. Hearing his thoughts aloud, the girl laughed and told him he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Enthusiastically, she said they were now one group, no matter what. Placed in the same group as the 2 main characters, he took the chance to check his status. He reached level 3, and his health, mana, and other stats all increased. After descending into the dungeon, the small group went straight to the 2nd floor. They moved along the stone corridors, ready to face danger. As leader, Hanagasaki Raka told Takasugi he was the weakest and should stay behind her. Takasugi was slightly surprised by the direct comment. A goblin suddenly appeared before them. Jingyuji saw the girl's reaction and grinned, noticing she had offended the young man. The girl ignored him and prepared for battle. Takasugi decided it was time to prove himself. From his back, he drew a new weapon he had gotten from the purchasing department. It was a rank E ninja sword that added 30 damage. Jingyuji examined the weapon and said skeptically that it was good but useless without skill. The boy, determined, said he knew how to use it and would fight. A long-haired girl takes a fighting stance, ready to strike. After landing a precise strike, the protagonist remembers the manual mentioning that the Jingyuji family owns one of the most famous dojos for spearmanship. The student also remembers that combat guilds are treated as criminals when they attack members of other guilds. On further reflection, the protagonist figured that since Jingyuji grew up in that guild, she might even be worse than the aristocrats. Another toothy monster suddenly appeared behind the young man, and his dark-haired companions screamed to warn him of the danger. Shouting a battle cry, the boy dodged at lightning speed and left the monster no chance to strike. Seeing a large monster approach, his heart began to pound in anticipation. Without thinking, he readied his sword and charged at the new threat. Gripping his sword's hilt tightly, he took a blow. His gaze was steady and determined, fully focused on the upcoming duel and ready for any outcome. He landed a powerful chopping blow on the monster's body. The monster had no time to react to such a swift attack. His companions watched him with clear admiration and approval. After the monster fell, the student pushed off its body, moved closer to his group, and breathed heavily. Takasugi scanned the area and saw monsters gathering around the group. Monsters surround the group on all sides. It seems this time they can overwhelm the group by sheer numbers. Takasugi thinks the situation is critical and that they're all going to die. Instead, the hero's companions take a different approach. The staff's base hits the stone floor with a loud thud. Hanukasaki grips the staff with both hands and focuses on chanting the spell. Snowflake-like crystals form in the air around her. Suddenly, they become projectiles, racing toward the enemy at terrifying speed. Each shell hit its mark, dealing devastating damage to the monsters. The defeated enemy's bodies thud to the ground. Unprepared, the hero is stunned by the sight. Iano then joins the battle. The girl unleashes a rapid barrage of lightning-fast spear strikes. Each of them finds a target, cutting through the goblins. All the enemies here have been defeated, their remains scattered across the floor. Iano exhales, says it wasn't bad, and notes there aren't many people in the dungeon today, so the group can earn some experience points. Takasugi remains stunned and silent. Stepping away from the stopper, the hero mutters angrily that it's impossible to train in these conditions. After all, the girls handled all the opponents themselves. Hanakasaki dismissively says the guy is weak but stubborn. Turning his back on his companions, the hero says the girl can mock all she wants and that he will soon be the strongest and beat them all. Dono laughs amused and wonders how Takasugi could think that, while he irritably decides to let it be. He somehow reached level 5 and learned another general skill, storage. The group leaves the dungeon and sees an upsetting scene. A self-assured man strikes a student hard in the chest. The attacker orders the student to step aside. Thrown backward, the man lands on his back in a cloud of dust while his companions stand frozen, offering no resistance or protection, and one group appears to be stopping the other from reaching the dungeon. The victim springs to his feet. A fight seems about to start. Gano covers her mouth and says it was dangerous. Hanagasaki tells them the students ahead are from Class A. The hero watches, confused, and says nothing. Turning away, Hanukasaki says it's best not to mess with these upstarts. As the girls leave, remembering the pokes and prods he's suffered, Takasugi, who is constantly bullied, finds it painful to watch, but the aristocrats here are unlikely to ignore a commoner treating them rudely. While thinking about how to intervene, the man keeps watching the group of aggressors. Takasugi walked along the river after school. I walked until I reached the waterfall. The spot seemed secluded enough to take care of my business without being seen. Holding the manju, he notes he bought everything he needed. With a strong swing, he sends the cake into the water. Takasugi kneels, folds his hands in prayer, and asks for strength. A bright light starts to seep out from the waterfall. Answering the prayer, an entity wearing a dragon mask and odd clothes rises from the water and agrees to grant the request. Despite following the guide, the hero is still a little scared. A mysterious power surrounds him, opening new possibilities. Tony's manual says the bishop is the strongest class, unlockable at level 5, and it improves status and boosts attributes. With God's blessing, Takasugi successfully changed his class and went to the school's research department. There the hero meets a strange man, his body almost completely covered in tattoos. The stranger studies the hero thoughtfully, as if trying to figure him out. Out of nowhere, the man says the hero will suit him, explains he just finished a prototype for a new emblem of power, and offers to test it on himself. Opening the door, he asks Takasugi if there is any free space on his body. The hero swallows nervously and nods. Mad scientist is the best description for his new acquaintance. They walk on as Takasugi lies down on the bed. For some reason, the man cuffs his hands to the back of the bed. The hero requests more coats of arms for strengthening I, acceleration V, exorcism IV, and summoning 2. At first he refuses and asks for some space, saying his back isn't made of rubber. After a moment's thought, he changes his mind. He notes the assembly should turn out well. Right after the conversation, Takasugi lost consciousness. The hero remains unconscious on a bed in Laboratory 300 for a while. At last he comes to his senses. The man props himself up on his elbow. He rises carefully from the bed and walks to the mirror. Takasugi studies his back in the mirror and sees in the light that his collection of coats of arms has noticeably grown. The mad scientist gave the hero everything he asked for. Normally, the hero would have to meet conditions to earn each coat of arms, but he got them all for free. The passerby asks Takasugi if he admires the new crests. Takasugi turns around. The guidebook was right. This is the inventor of the treatment IV coat of arms. The man asks which science department Takasugi is in. Realizing he should have read the guidebook all the way through, the hero nervously considers what to say. Takasugi finally admits, awkwardly, that he was simply lost and trying to find a way out. The inventor of the coat of arms suddenly grows frightened and grabs the hero by the shoulders, forcing him to swear not to tell anyone about what happened today. Takasugi agrees, since the man gave him so many coats of arms. The inventor warns he can show the coats of arms the boy requested to anyone he chooses, but no one should see his prototype. The hero says he understands everything and will not show this coat of arms to anyone. Satisfied with the answer, the inventor asks where Takasugi saw that collection of coats of arms. The hero says the idea just came to him somehow. The inventor is skeptical, saying amateurs usually prefer more elaborate spells, and Takasugi's build looks simple but raises doubts. He says the build was worked on for a long time, with millions of combinations tried, as if someone was preparing for every possible situation. The inventor says the person who came up with it seems to know more about coats of arms than he does. Takasugi has nothing to say about this. The man calms himself, turns to leave, and says this is simply impossible. Already heading for the door, the inventor wonders whether to begin researching different combinations. The hero watches him leave in silence. Darkness had already fallen outside. Takasugi reminds himself he is a bishop now and can use healing. He explains the effects of the new crests. Strengthen boosts his strength, haste raises his agility, exorcism removes debuffs, summon enables summoning magic. Relieved, the hero got everything he needed in one go. Walking past the dungeon entrance, he hears and notices something strange. Something barely human is climbing the stairs. One look makes the horned figure almost unrecognizable as a person. Takasugi stares at the creature in horror, trying to figure out what it is. The monster surfaces and scans its surroundings. Takasugi watches nervously as the monster begins to move. Hiding behind a tree, the hero peeks out quietly to stay unseen and slowly realizes who he is watching. When the monster walks past the boy's hideout, the boy's legs begin to shake. Takasugi is sure it's him, the monster that devours students at the academy and takes their form, and the guidebook also says so. According to the plot, he should appear much later. Panic rises in the hero as an obvious guest approaches him. The game is getting unpredictable. The guy wonders whether this could be a response to the NPC's unusual behavior. The monster turns the corner of the building. As Takasugi watches it go, he realizes there's nothing he can do about it. Right now, even the protagonist can't handle him. The hero doesn't know what form the monster will take, but it's already clear someone at the academy will be killed. At the moment, the boy is still too weak, so he can only stand there quietly and watch. If this creature discovers she has been exposed, it's frightening to imagine the consequences. Takasugi fights another monster in the dungeon until he is exhausted, his wounds visible and blood running down his face. With a wild swing, the hero severs part of the slime. After bubbling for a few seconds, the monster explodes. Takasugi's level is rising. Thrilled, he's now level 6 and his health, strength, magic power, and durability have all increased. The man wipes sweat from his forehead and lets out a tired sigh as someone calls out, warning that the boss is dangerous and he should stop taking such risks. Hanagasaki is behind him. After pausing, he replies, clearly annoyed that he's won before. The girl doesn't have to worry about it. Hanagasaki asks, unsure whether this really wasn't the first time. Takasugi looks at her and realizes Hanagasaki still sees him as weak, and he finds that rude. In the past 10 days, he killed around 150 boss slimes and managed to level up. Finally, he got the item he needed. Ancient Ring is the item's name. The guidebook recommends it as the best early health boost. Gaining 300 health at the start is clearly noticeable. It's a good choice for players who don't want the game to end quickly. Takasugi inspects the object, knowing the find is far from the most valuable, but needing it desperately right now, while Hanagasaki watches in confusion. Most importantly, the hero made it to level 6. It's time for another dungeon descent. Takasugi is unhappy with his group this time. Yano is furious about this. The girl says she and Hanagasaki are at one of the highest levels and everyone dreams of joining their group, and they accepted him, a loser, so he should be grateful to them. The spearhead stops a few centimeters from the hero's face, and Yano shouts that without them, he'd still be staggering on the first floor and has barely made any progress. Takasugi smiles slightly and asks whether the girl is truly sure about this. The group descends into the dungeon and enters a long room lined with many columns. The wolf-like monster growls and bares its fangs. A sudden lunge at the hero is met by the hero's ready sword. The monster crashes into the man and they both fall to the floor, but Takasugi drives his sword through the monster, the blade piercing its body and coming out of its back. A loud hiss, then the defeated wolf's body vanishes into thin air. Yano looks frightened. She notices the hero still has the same sword and asks whether he sharpened it, since the damage looks impressive. Indignant Takasugi says the girl is implying he only managed to catch up with them because of the weapon. Yano tells him it's time to stop bringing this up and sarcastically says he wasn't really that hurt by her words. Hanagasaki notices something surprising. The hero appears unharmed, his attack power now matching Yano's despite her higher level, and she wonders how he caught up so fast. Takasugi says his current defense prevents the local monster from harming him. The hero finds this really strange and hopes his companions won't ask about his class. After about a year, she irritably tells her friend that it's hopeless. There's no point dealing with someone who doesn't even know what it's like to work hard at training. She suggests going down to the 3rd floor because they won't be able to level up here and defiantly asks the hero if he can handle it. Takasugi suspects Jingyuji is trying to prove he's superior in the fight against the 3rd floor monsters. Hanagasaki isn't as excited as her friend. Thoughtfully, she notes the 3rd floor is full of monsters who use magic. The group doesn't need to hurry. Annika admits she's a little scared. The hero asks in amazement if the girls still haven't been there. Yano says the man probably wasn't there either. The lower they go, the more likely they are to die. Yano says Takasugi must be getting there too early. The man refuses to answer. They still head down to the 3rd floor. Almost immediately, monsters wearing wooden masks and carrying staffs confront them. This detail indirectly confirms Hanagasaki's fears. A monster attacks and fires magical projectiles at the group. Yano charges forward without a trace of fear, dodges the enemy's attacks, and pounces on the monster. Now she strikes. As before, she cuts through the monsters with ease using her spear. The defeated opponent's bodies disintegrate with a hiss, but the girl is wounded because a sharp splinter pierced her shoulder and got stuck. Takasugi reaches toward the shard stuck in Yano's bite. The shard starts to glow. The healing coat of arms works as intended. The girls wound their heals in a matter of minutes. The hero turns and with clear irony imitates Yano, telling her not to rush into danger since she's still too weak, and the girl flushes, barely containing her indignation. They are suddenly spoken to rudely. 3 men stand in front of them, not at all friendly, and demand the group leave the floor because this is Class C's territory and Class D should find another place. Tension keeps the group silent. Takasugi remembers Class C started going down into the dungeon in middle school, and the gap is probably about 5 levels. C-class representatives look very arrogant, and one is openly chewing something. Forced to comply, the group follows as Yano, clearly irritated, calls the men she meets upstarts, and Hanagasaki tells her to stop, reminding her those upstarts are still stronger. Students from Class C interrupted the practical lesson on dungeon diving. Long-standing discontent has been growing in the C-class, and the group is now in the middle of a feud. An all-class fencing session was announced. The teacher calls up the next wrestlers. Takasugi stands, and his opponent gives an arrogant wince. Taunting his opponent, he asks whether they will really be a D-class underling. The class representatives standing behind him look openly contemptuous. Bullied by the classes above them, they took it out on Class D. The The hero figures everyone is just angry about having to fall over the A and B classes. The enemy draws his sword. Smiling maniacally, he says it's a shame to waste time on someone like that, and the guy would be wise not to complain later. Drawing his sword, the hero begins the fight to the sound of the C class's laughter. Takasugi says this man is clearly very angry, but so is the whole C class. The hero is not afraid, and in fact just wanted to test his strength. Both opponents are ready for battle. Takasugi is focused, but the C-class representative already seems to have won. The teacher gives the signal to begin. The man leaps up with a wild cry and charges the hero. Takasugi narrowly avoids the fierce attack. Under the enemy's astonished gaze, the hero reaches out his hand. He activates the thunder skill. A strong electric shock surges through his opponent's body. A surge ran through him, and as he fought to regain his composure, he shouted angrily that this is a fencing class and you can't use magic here. The spectators are completely unfazed by this injustice and insist the fight continue. Even Takasugi looks around in disbelief, while his opponent seems forced to accept the injustice. The teacher stays silent, offering no comments about the hero. Takasugi thinks the students in Class A wouldn't let the teacher speak and started giving orders themselves. This must be the way they judge the fences themselves. Recognizing that magic might be possible, the hero's opponent offers to try his trick. It triggers a fiery explosion. The skill's name fits perfectly, combining a roar with scorching fire. The hero covers his face with his hand and coughs, choking on the smoke. Amid the explosion's flames, only a blurred silhouette can be seen. Moments later, the audience sees Takasugi again. His clothes and face are a bit smudged with soot, but he is unharmed. The enemy can't believe his eyes and starts swearing. Consumed by uncontrollable rage, he strikes blow after blow with his jagged sword, forcing the hero into a fight to survive. A lightning-fast attack almost knocks Takasugi off his feet, but he keeps his balance. A student from Class A sees no need to pity the Class D representative, so they turn to the representative and cast a spell. Flames swirl around his sword. Takasugi learns the flame technique. Takasugi can't believe the enemy coated his sword with a spell. He gives a crooked smile and immediately rushes forward. Moving at incredible speed, he pounces on the hero. Takasugi is only briefly amazed and can no longer block or dodge the blow. The blow lands so hard it throws Takasugi backward. Flying across the room, he slams into a wooden wall and leaves a dent, then slides down to the floor. The other students turn to watch, some with disdain and others with genuine concern. Blood runs down the hero's face and his nose is twisted to the side. He still seems dazed, staring into the void ahead. The other students watch the boy and are impressed by the scale of the battle. Takasugi inhales deeply and regains control. Using the coat of arms, he heals. When magic takes hold, all damage vanishes instantly with a soft hiss. The enemy isn't stopping and is charging straight at him. Attacking from the side, he tries to strike again, but the hero jumps back. Takasugi blocks every possible attack with his sword and thrusts his free hand forward, preparing to strike again with a spell. Thunder passes through the opponent again, making him writhe in pain. Frozen, he drops his sword and cannot speak. The hero breathes hard and keeps his hands raised. A Class A student announces the fight is over. Takasugi's opponent tries to protest, insisting he hasn't lost yet. A harsh reply tells him he cannot do anything to counter the spell. The hero looks at him in surprise. He gives a hateful look, but can't challenge the class above him. Meanwhile, Class A students immediately decide who will take part in the next battle. If a representative of a stronger class readily accepts the challenge, the poor student from Class D is sweating, realizing only mockery awaits him here. Once the harsh lesson ended, the students returned to the classroom. The mood felt like a funeral, and more than half the students left with serious injuries, many lying on their desks while others hurriedly treated their wounds. The class was physically assaulted. This seems to happen every year. Teachers don't notice what's happening and ignore discrimination against Class D. Someone calls to Takasugi from behind, and he turns around. Hanagasaki stands with an unfamiliar girl who is friendly toward the hero, noting they have not seen each other in a long time. The hero looks at his interlocutors with bewilderment. It makes no sense that they haven't seen each other in so long when they have never met. Hanagasaki introduces his companion, while Amatsuki Yakoha asks whether they know each other. Takasugi says he has never heard that name before. Amatsuka becomes upset and asks how he could forget her, because they went to high school together. Puzzled, the hero asks whether this is really true. Takasugi reads the quote from a former classmate, thinks these hidden settings are unnecessary, and concludes the person who designed them has no heart. On the verge of tears, Amatsuka says she wasn't feeling well and was resting at home, and she asks if the hero really forgot her. A man tries to force something out of himself, but can't find the right words. Fed up with his callousness, the girl calls him terrible and asks whether Takasugi is all right in the head, and to him that question from the pink-haired girl does not sound very convincing. Hanagasaki says Amatsuka's level is low after being away for a long time, so the girl decided to help her, and since the hero owes her for earlier help, she wants to bring him along. Irritated, Takasugi thinks Hanagasaki is once again trying to help everyone, and he can't understand where she got the idea. Amatsuka Yoko is a fairly popular magical character who specializes in healing magic, is optimistic and always does things her own way, shows a gentle yet very energetic side, and missed the first month of school because of poor health. As the class discussed discrimination against Class D, the hero slipped out and went to the dungeon alone. Running through the uncomfortable halls, he decides he must level up, so he heads for the 7th floor. Just a little more and he reaches his goal. The 7th floor looks like a battlefield, the ground strewn with fragments of armor, swords driven into the floor here and there, and a haze hanging in the air. Only ghosts can be defeated with magic. Zombies and skeletons live here too. These enemies have strong magic, so most people bypass them and go straight down to the next floor. If you have the bishop class, a single blow will defeat them. Now familiar hissing marks victory over the new enemies, and debris flies toward Takasugi but causes no harm. The hero figures that if the others learned about this easy hunting ground, they would rush in and fight over territory. Takasugi comes back to the academy. Back in class, the first thing he hears is an unexpected, deeply unpleasant accusation that he is holding everyone back. During their discussion of Lost Class C, the long-haired man tries to pin all the blame on Takasugi, and the hero asks what they're talking about and whether they've decided to declare war on the other classes. He knows that if things stay as they are now, the conflict will reignite as time goes on. The A-class boss has magical vision, making him an extremely tough opponent, and Takasugi is unsure he can beat him even at level 20. Focus on leveling up instead of wasting time on pointless arguments. The long-haired boy angrily shouts at the hero to make his point clear. They all want the other classes to stop walking all over Class D, and Takasugi is the one dragging everyone down. Calmly, the hero says the accuser should work on improving himself instead of blaming others. Ikijo cuts them off, and the other student says arguing in class will only make things worse for everyone. He says they will have to fight sooner or later because the C class will not stop. That confident statement quieted everyone and focused their attention on the speaker. Takasugi believes Class C began entering the dungeon 2 years ago, so overtaking them won't be easy. He might do it, but he can't tell the others about the guidebook. Eshio's suggestion paid off. The students started saying that chattering wouldn't make them stronger and that they should focus on themselves now. Yano insists she wants to reach the top 2 and will not accept this discrimination. Listening to her speech, the hero nods inwardly. Jingyuji says getting stronger is the best way out of the current situation. Despite class conflicts, he could already go down to the 7th floor after only a month. Now at level 20, Takasugi's stats have improved significantly. They descend back into the dungeon. Hanagasaki and Takasugi continue helping Amatsuka, and after leveling up the hero switched his weapon. The hero charges the enemy with a fierce cry. One swing of his giant sword splits the monster in two. Amatsuka shyly thanks her friends for their help and realizes she is taking up their time. Hanagasaki says not to worry. The man seems to be enjoying all this, but he needs to be calmed. Takasugi keeps fighting, and he recently leveled up on the 7th floor, bringing his status to average and switching his job to Gladiator. Gladiator is an attack type that boosts health, strength, and agility. In the past, gladiators had to fight in arena with almost no protection and were forbidden to use magic. As a result, their magic power and durability were never increased, so attack stats are easy to raise, while mana and magic are harder to develop. Takasugi knows he can't level up properly on this floor, so he decides to have fun instead. His rented sword easily cuts down every opponent. Hanagasaki notes how effortlessly the hero wields such a huge sword. She says the boy is already a skilled fighter, and his rapid development is remarkable. Offended, Takasugi asks why the girl is looking down on him. Just like that guy 3 days ago, the hero doesn't understand what's wrong with any of them. Amatsuka reacts in surprise that Takasugi could be more talented than Hanagasaki, then says it is impossible. Hanagasaki replies that he was so awful at the start, she was amazed he was still alive. The hero demands that the girl stop treating him like he has no talent because his low status caused the early problems. Hanagasaki says the initial status reflects the student's talent and that she praises the boy for his effort because he has improved significantly. Takasugi knows he has no real talent, but he finds it hard to admit. In just half a day, Amatsuka reached level 5. This is great for the first day. Changing the subject, the hero suggests heading down to the 4th floor because they can't level up here. Hanukasaki agrees and says he hopes there will be no problems. The guy says if Classy bothers them again, they can just beat them up, and he's sure Akijo has already dealt with them. The girl finds his reasoning too simple and asks what gives him that confidence. The hero stays silent as Amatsuka asks whether he has always been like this and gets no reply. The group heads down to the 4th floor. Before the students have taken a few steps, they see a large crowd and realize a fight is starting between classes C and D. Tensions are rising, and both sides are on the brink of open fighting. Takasugi climbs to the base of the columns in a couple of moves and cheerfully says the view will be much better from there. Hanukasaki asks how he got up there. A C-class student openly threatens the D-class, saying it's too early for them to be here and demanding they leave. Ichicho says confidently that they will advance even if they must use force. The C-class is not intimidated by this statement. Still, the students of Class D are fiercely determined. Studying the fighters, the hero spots Kuriyama from Class C in the speaker. The guidebook says opponents on this floor are at most level 12. From that, the guide concludes the combatants are about 4 levels apart. Although Ikihu and his comrades have far worse equipment and weapons than the Class C team, as the main character, he will turn the situation in his favor. Takasagi is wondering who will win. The protagonist moves to attack. Some students follow his example, and Ikijo swings his sword. Eventually, you feel you hit the enemy. Kiryu Malin has returned. He's safe and sound, grinning as he asks whether this is all D-class can do. Despite his determination, Eshio can't harm his opponent. The hero realizes his weapon isn't rare enough to get through the defense. Kuriyama demands that everyone listen closely and warns that anyone who tries to interfere to help the protagonist will face the same fate, so everyone should remain quiet and just watch. Takasugi knows Kuriyama will not be happy if Echiju gets outside support, and if Class D remains idle the guy will lose, so the hero decides and begins to cast a spell. The effect is immediate, and Akiho's attack power and agility increase dramatically. As the protagonist tries to understand what just happened, Kuriyama screams and demands that whoever used magic confess. Takasugi turns away, whistling a tune while his companions stare at him, not understanding what it means. Ikijo looks back and thanks his assistant, even though he is not sure who did it, and then calls his partners to join the fight. Threats no longer scare anyone, and the students of Class D head into battle. They cast 2 spells on Kuriyama at the same time. The boy crosses his arms and braces himself to stay in place as spells fly past him. Still, Ichijo immediately follows the magical strike with a swift attack. Kuriyama parries, and the blades meet with a deafening ring. The protagonist realizes this is not over. Kuriyama smiles coldly and begins to cast a spell. Flames engulf the mages, had joined the fight on opposite sides just moments earlier. A powerful shockwave knocks you off your feet. Flames engulf the students, making them scream in pain. One of them collapses to the ground, and Hanukasaki and Yano watch in wide-eyed horror. Despite the difficulty, Eshio and the second magician manage to rise to their feet. Kuriyama remains in the same confident pose, smoke curling from his palm. The protagonist rushes in with a fresh attack. Circling the enemy with incredible speed, he slips behind him. The maneuver fails. Kuriyama watches his moves and turns toward him just as he makes the decisive dash. He summons a burst of fire. At the last moment, a magician steps between each EO and the terrible spell. Surprised, Kuriyama watches the fireball hit the magic shield and fail to get through, while the main character keeps moving. Kuriyama fails to dodge this time. A blow strikes the chest as Takasugi watches, amazed by the long-awaited victory. The blow hit his leg and chest. Kuriyama falls to the floor, fresh blood spraying all around him. The students in Class D watch in speechless delight, as if witnessing a real miracle, and even the main character can hardly believe he caused it. Class C students surround the wounded man. The winners helped their wounded comrades and headed for the passage to the next floor. Takasugi tells his companions it is time for them to move on too. Still shaken by what she saw, Hanagasaki says beating someone from Class C isn't that easy. As the group moves toward the next floor, a mage wounded by Kiriyama calls out, the same man who earlier called Takasugi useless, and he's angry that the others did nothing but are still going to enter. The girls remain silent, and the hero calmly replies that the accuser himself never helped Ikijo. Takasugi thinks that if he had acted, the fight would have been much easier. A rude reply sparks an even harsher reaction. The man shouts that he actually risked his life. The hero points to his own words that the class must improve. By that logic, Takasugi must raise his level too. Answering another angry cry, the hero points to the defeated Kuriyama behind him and says that if the champion of justice wants to imitate these men, he is ready to fight. The man lunges at Takasugi, but Masao grabs his shoulders and pulls him back. He says the hero is much stronger now. Silent for now, Takasugi acts as if it does not concern him. The group heads down to the 4th floor. Weary, Amatsuka looks around and asks if the 3 of them can handle everything. The hero says he's with them, so everything is fine. Unhappy with the answer, the girl asks her friend to confirm that the guy is not serious. Hanagasaki replies that if Takashi says everything is fine, it is, but she still considers herself the guarantor of safety, and Amatsuka agrees while remaining uneasy. Takasugi turns around and reproaches her for not believing him, but she stands motionless, and Hanagasaki trusted him immediately. A mask-like grin crosses the girl's face as she asks again. Amatsuka replies indignantly that the man might not know him, but his reputation is very dubious because everyone says he is so weak he can't even kill a slime. Indignant, the hero shouts that this is just gossip and nothing has been proven. Hanagasaki reminds the boy that she protected him from the slimes. Takasugi quickly corrects her, clarifying it was the slime boss and that he himself was level 1. For Amatsuki, this alone is enough to call the hero weak. The man yells that it was at the very beginning. The new floor opens into an odd space, as if not meant for a dungeon. There are important requests all around here, and people can go about their business in peace. Takasugi looks around and sees hotels, a rest area, and shops. The area feels more like a city. Amatsuka is especially impressed by the vending machines. The fastest level-up spots were taken by other explorers. The group steadily advanced along the 4th floor. There they come across a new type of monster. Some look like goblins, others like pigs standing on their hind legs. Confidently, Hanagasaki cast the spell, and the monster froze, captivated by the terrible yet beautiful sight. The spell blankets the opponents and the entire corridor behind them. As the magical haze thins, you see that the monsters have frozen into ice statues. Takasugi shouts that he can't do much with his view blocked. Hanagasaki says he'll have to get used to it. The man charges. Skillfully wielding his sword, he cuts the monsters many times. Each blow hits its mark, leaving the victims badly wounded. Detached body parts fall to the floor as blood spills out. Girls' levels go up. The hero tells his companions it's time to finish. Hanagasaki says it's easy to gain weight here again, and she wants to level up a bit more. Takasugi asks what level the girls have reached now. Hanagasaki replies she is currently level 9 and wants to reach level 10 today. The hero shrugs, saying it's only their first day here, so there's no need to hurry, and the girls stare at him in confusion. Hanagasaki asks in a suspicious tone if the boy will share his progress and wonders why Takasugi won't tell her his level. Refusing to boast, he says he won't talk about his level because he wants to keep it a secret. Annoyed, the girl says she has lately been seeing a man near the dungeon after class. She asks whether Takasugi went to the mountains to swing his sword. The hero grumbles that of course he went, even down to the 7th floor, and reminds himself he is not looking for unnecessary problems. Yano says it's her first day, and she's already reached level 6, adding that each new level makes future level-ups more powerful. The group moves on looking for new places to pump. The hero spots something interesting and heads over. Finding a passage to the 5th floor, he calls his companions. He recommends we look down there. The staircase descends deep along massive stone steps wrapped in tree roots. After scanning the area, the group descends carefully. At last, the explorers reach the foot of the stairs. A loud noise grabs their attention, and the students turn around as tension rises. Before them stands a colossal three-eyed lizard, saliva dripping from its teeth and fire bursting from the holes in its back, its roar shaking the area around them. Stunned, the researchers watched the terrible creature. This isn't the only enemy. the floor is shaking from someone's furry paw. On the other side, a huge saber-toothed beast is advancing toward the group. The giant lizard opens its jaws, and a flame bursts from deep within. Suddenly, the monster slams the ground with a crushing blow. The researchers scream in horror. The lizard raises its head. A mark from the blow scars its muzzle, but the floor has suffered more. A huge pothole gapes in the stone surface. The second monster wastes no time and sneaks up on the group from behind. Takasugi barely registers its leap and shouts for the girls to duck. He then tries to fend off the attack by striking the jaw with his sword. Recoiling, the monster loses its huge fangs. The beast crashes to the ground with a roar. The hero stands shielding Hanagasaki and Ayano, and the girls cannot join the fight as each second adds to their paralyzing panic. Moments later, a jet of flame burst from the lizard's mouth and engulfed them. Takasugi absorbed all the damage, using his body to shield the girls. As the fire attack ends, Hanagasaki calls to Takashi. Takashi stays frozen in place, his clothes still burning. Holding up fairly well, the hero turns to face the lizard and thinks magical attacks are a real pain. It's fortunate he has resistance to them. Takasugi could handle it alone, but he knows that if the monsters target the girls, there will be no time for jokes. A man darts to the side, distracting the lizard with a loud cry. With its 3 eyes, the monster watches them closely. Opening his mouth, he spits fire again. Takasugi launches out of the flames like a projectile. In just a few moves, he climbs onto the monster and drives his sword through its head. Defeated, the lizard falls heavily to the floor. Gano presses a hand to her mouth as Hanagasaki watches in amazement. Standing over the defeated monster's body, the hero stays still for a few seconds while one thought keeps pulsing in his head. He now belongs to them. Finally, they return to the 4th floor and spend another 2 hours leveling up, then stopped at a nearby hotel to rest. Inside, the tired travelers were disappointed because only one room was available. In a mixed gender group, the situation was nearly critical. One intense look from the women ended any question of who should sacrifice themselves.